Good morning and welcome to the new episode of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. We pride ourselves on living in countries that are democratic, where we elect our leaders who give expression to our thoughts, our ideas, our hopes, our aspirations. But it's rarely so. And there are various reasons for that. The most important is that such leaders have to be elected to really represent us, and for that, for a genuine democracy to flourish, it is imperative that the election process should be flawless. That, of course, requires national character. That requires leaders who are honest, and that requires a systemic attitude of integrity and honesty. But that's rarely so. One thing or another there is there. And Canada, which we always hoped to be a paragon of integrity and honesty, we find that last year's election results were okay, but then now some irregularities are beginning to emerge. During the current political crisis, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau declared before the House of Commons that any views of Freedom Convoy were irrelevant because the Canadian people at the last election gave the Liberals a mandate to continue vaccine requirement and lockdown measures. Now, what sort of logic is that election decides everything, and then the minority groups or the descendants or the people who disagree have no right to express their opinion? As I said in the beginning, I have absolutely no sympathy with the Freedom Convoy. I think it was misconceived. I fully agree with that. But to call and deduce that the elections gave the Liberals a mandate to be dictators is something which I cannot digest. Trudeau also referred to Freedom Convoy as a fringe minority. Well, minorities are always fringe, and they do not represent the views of the most Canadians. Yes, but does that mean that they should be negated? Then where is the concept of the freedom of expression and freedom of speech? The elections that took place last year were almost a snap election. This snap election was called during the peak of Delta wave. It was Canada's first pandemic election. It witnessed unprecedented measures in mail-in voting and emphasis on disseminating election misinformation and disinformation, and COVID rules limited the capability of polling stations. The results: Liberals won 160 seats, Conservatives 119, Bloc Québécois 32, NDP 25, and Green 42. So the Liberals formed a minority government. Did he get a majority mandate from the Canadian people? Did he win the election fairly? There is growing evidence that both are incorrect. The first irregularity was the foreign interference. It's beyond a reasonable doubt that there was evidence of foreign information. China interfered in the September 20 elections to benefit Trudeau. There is a think group called Disinfo Watch. They have done an in-depth report, and I read, after analyzing the available open source data and consulting with key stakeholders, we believe that the timing and the content of the narrative indicates the likelihood of a coordinated influence operation targeting the Canadian Chinese voters. The Conservative Party has indicated that 13 electoral districts were affected by the Chinese intervention. 13, imagine it. And these include some of the conservative strongholds. But we have seen as a result of that that some of the outstanding MPs belonging to Conservative Party lost elections. And that was not because the people didn't like them, that was because of disinformation. And then they lost the seat with surprising margins. There's also a correlation between the candidates targeted and the strong views criticizing China. Some of the interference was obvious. The Chinese ambassador to Canada, Kong Ping, warned Canadians not to elect parties that smear China. The Communist Party run Global Times had an editorial priming a strong counter-strike if the Conservatives won. Was there a condemnation with the government? No. The Chinese government repeatedly demonstrated its readiness to advance its interest in Canada by directly manipulating Canadian politics through the use of disinformation, threats, intimidation, and influence operations directed at Canadian diaspora groups. A specific attack was directed against Conservative candidate Kenny Chu. I'm just giving an example. This Kenny Chu is from Richmond East in Vancouver. The main message of attack was to the Chinese WeChat social media app, which over 1 million Chinese Canadians use. 1 million. So they were impacted not to vote for him. There was a report published by DFR Lab, and it is Atlantic Councils. They have identified an organization called HuiNet as a principal actor behind the Canadian election case. They offer translation services. They work very closely with the Chinese diplomats, and they have links to the United Front Work Department. And the United Front Work Department, most of the people may not be aware, is a Chinese governmental external propaganda organization that is very active in Canada. One WeChat account associated with HuiNet is named Toronto Lingam Goa, the Toronto Consulate in Chinese, and they reposted the defamation articles targeting Kenny one day before it was posted on WeChat. The method was used several times in 13 districts. So, the result was a double-digit swing to the Liberal candidates. Was that fair? Was that not foreign intervention, clear-cut? In fact, it was torpedoing the election. Then, the South China Morning Post noticed a phenomena of heavily Chinese Canadian districts turning dramatically against the Tories. The National Post wrote, Richmond, Canada's most Chinese district, buckled national trend by defeating the Richmond Centre Conservative MP Alice Wong, despite the fact that she had won by more than 20 points in 2019. Do you think that anything happened in these 2 years to not only reduce it by 20 points, but much more than that, except that it was thanks to WeChat and the Chinese propaganda? Now, CSIS, Canadian Intelligence and Security Services, had warned months before the election that foreign intervention is likely to be there. This Chinese intervention may not be decisive, but why is the government not conducting an investigation as to why Chinese government would help Trudeau win? Caesar's wife should be above suspicion. So Trudeau, if he is honest, and if Liberal Party has integrity, they should order an investigation. Why not? But this was not the only irregularity. The other outstanding feature of 44th Canadian general election was the massive increase in mail-in voting. About 13 million mail-in voting ballots were for those living in Canada, residents outside of Canada, and members of the armed forces. Election Canada published a report that indicated that 2 million mail-in ballots were not even counted, even though they were requested. 2 million ballots. How can you disenfranchise 2 million plus people who vote and then you throw them in the waste paper basket? And what the hell was Election Canada doing? They published a report. Why did they not take action? And they say some of the ballots were laid and not returned, and some should not have been counted. What a specious plea. The irregularities in 123,000 mail-in ballots was that they were delayed being sent to the voters until less than 1 week before the election day. The fault is by the Election Canada, not by the voters. So why should the voters be penalized? That left little chance for any of those ballots to be returned in time. If you vote, send it less than 5 working days, it reaches them, and by that time the election day is over. So you can't vote. So this proves to be a decisive amount of votes in tightly contested elections. Again, according to the official election commission data, 34 electoral districts had a margin victory of 2,000 votes or less. The margin of victory in these districts total 33,000 votes. And 123,000 ballots had not come. So the total margin is 33,000. And if those ballots had come, the 21 ridings which Liberal won might not have been 21, might have been 5, 10. Now in 65 districts the margin of victory was less than million ballots returned. So if those ballots had come in, they would have lost. In 8 districts the margin of victory is smaller than million ballots missing because they were late or not returned. And when the 13 districts interfered by China are added, a total of 73 districts were or could have been affected by the mail-in ballot irregularities. In 48 of these districts, 63.5%, the Liberals won. The Conservative won a distant 40 and 19%. And most of the places where they won, actually in 48 ridings, the Liberals won with a threshold of less than 2,000 votes. The total margin of victory in all of them, 73 won combined, is 149,000. So in other words, the districts where there was foreign intervention, a very close blaze, with the mail-in ballots, the results were skewed in favor of the Liberals. So 73 seats, you judge for yourself. Another interesting facet to the data is that these 73 districts, a majority were in the strategic urban areas. 33 of the districts are in Ontario, a majority in the GTA area, which alone has 50 districts. And Trudeau managed to win nearly all of them and gain the main power block in 160-seat minority government. The candidate, if we see the correlation, according to the Election Canada report again, in Toronto, 15 electoral districts had 448 fewer polling stations than the last election. As a matter of fact, this time there should have been more polling stations because of social distancing. But no, 448 fewer polling stations, and the number of the polling stations locations is decreased by 75%. Available polling places are not big enough to set up individual voting desks that are required. For example, in Mississauga, Statesville, 1,500 million ballots accumulated outside a mailroom, not controlled by the Election Commission, and therefore could not be counted. 1,589. If this happened in Mississauga, it could have happened anywhere else. I quote from Western Standard. In other cases, building owners who agreed to lease space to Election Canada withdrew their contract. So this forced our returning officers to identify new places. As a result, the number of polling stations across Canada was reduced by 7%, and what was the result? Bottlenecks and lineups. Less number of people could vote. So, again, the election becomes fraudulent. And this explains the low turnover out of the voters. Despite that, Liberal Party was able to win all of the close races it needed, despite losing the popular vote. The Liberals had a total of 5 million votes, while the Conservatives finished with 5 votes. The total difference was 190. So why did all of that irregularities favor Justin Trudeau? This data raises more questions than the answers provided by Election Canada. The only way to know if there was election fraud is to have a full audit of all the mail-in ballots, practices, and foreign interference. Then there is a constant pattern of corruption since Justin Trudeau took office. There was the Aga Khan scandal, where he used his helicopter, and Aga Khan received millions of dollars from the federal government. The allegation of Trudeau groping a female reporter surfaced in 2018. In 2010, we had photographs of Trudeau wearing blackface at different points of his life. There was SNC-Lavalin affair, in which Trudeau attempted to change the prostitution laws. He then interfered with the investigation of Attorney General Wilson Traynor, and various prominent officials were forced to resign. 2020 comes We Charity scandal, in which 1 billion contact was given to the foundation in which his family, his finance minister, had financial interest. Imagine, and I don't want to bring in and wash the dirty linen, but the mother of Trudeau, Margaret, was paid $250,000 for speaking at 28 events. Alexander Trudeau received $32,000 for speaking at 8 events. The third investigation in Trudeau's were conducted. So imagine in 5 years, 3 investigations have been conducted. And then, to stop all that, the Prime Minister prorogued the Parliament so that there could be no investigation. Many members of the Parliament had to resign for less corruption. Harper had thrown a minister out for having an orange glass of orange juice for $16. So Trudeau was elected with only 32% of the popular votes, which is a historically all-time low. Only 14.6% Canadians voted for him. So, if only 14% Canadians voted for him, does he really have a mandate from the people to suspend the civil liberties and impose emergency? Why should a legitimately elected leader take dictatorial power if the Canadian people really don't support him? This defies logic and needs thinking on your part, the voters' part, the citizens' part. What is happening? And why is it happening? What is happening we have seen. Fraudulent elections, foreign interference, gerrymandering, name it and it's there. Willful suppression of depriving people from voting, leading to their disenfranchisement. Shall we wake up and protect our democracy and our rights? It's an open-ended question for you. Thank you.